From McMaster University, I'm John Preston, and you're listening to Big Ideas for a Changing World. In this series, you'll hear from researchers from McMaster's Faculty of Engineering and beyond who are creating innovative solutions to our world's greatest challenges. I have the chance to see some of these solutions up close as the faculty's Associate Dean for Research and External Relations. Joining me today are two very special guests, Ishwar K. Puri, McMaster's Dean of Engineering, and Susan Tai, McMaster's Provost and Vice President Academic, and also a member of the Faculty of Engineering. We're splitting this conversation into two parts. In part one, which you're listening to now, we'll reflect on the biggest lessons we learned in 2020 in terms of online teaching and learning. Stay tuned for part two, where we discuss what the future of engineering education holds, and I press our provost with the question that's on all of our minds. Will we return to campus in the fall, and how will we do that? With that, a warm welcome to our guests on Big Ideas for a Changing World.
Thank you, John. I'm really pleased to be here this morning and to share some perspectives with you.
And once again, welcome, Ishwar.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
So, how have the first few weeks of 2021 been for the both of you? Susan, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's been an exciting challenge. Finishing up 2020 was definitely a relief. I think that 2020 brought many challenges and changes, but also really an opportunity to do things differently. For me, joining McMaster University in July was a great experience. It was certainly really busy, but I'm really happy to be here. And to me, 2021 is going to be an exciting year. We have lots to look forward to. I think we've learned a lot through this pandemic, and I think it really is an opportunity for us to think about doing things better, think about doing things differently. And I think that for me is really exciting. So I'm really optimistic about 2021.
And Ishwar, how's 2021 greeted you?
John, I would describe the early part of 2021 through three words. The first is anxiety, and I think that's self-explanatory. The second, I would say, is accomplishment. We've done enormous things to educate students who are going to have outstanding outcomes. And I would say the third word that characterizes my feelings is resilience. We enter 2021 with optimism. We faced enormous challenges in 2020. We learned from them. We pivoted very rapidly. And so that has created a sense of resilience. And I think those are the three words, really: anxiety, accomplishment, and resilience.
Okay, excellent points. It turns out I noticed that today marks a poignant anniversary, actually. Today is the day that the first COVID-19 patient was hospitalized in Canada, the 1-year anniversary of that event. For the next question, I'd like to go back a little bit further than that, pre-emergence of the virus, and ask you both about what you saw as the challenges in higher education and what at that time you would have said you would have been working on at this point in time if the pandemic had never happened. Again, I'll start with you, Susan.
Right. Well, I think when you look back a year ago, we would have been doing our, let's say, status quo activities, and not to say that those activities weren't important, but we would have been following our normal governance structures. We would have been thinking about the students that were coming to start in 2020, doing some planning activities, thinking strategically how we as an institution can differentiate from each other. I would say that this was a dramatic, this was sort of the normal operation of business. I would say 1 year now is that we're really trying to, everything's changed. Everything is different. I think we've been able to prioritize what's really important. And we've been able to really start to think about how we can improve our processes. Universities are really slow to change. And so I think really what this has shown us is that we can change and we can modify carefully and thoughtfully, but that we don't necessarily have to do things the way we've always done them. So to me, that has been the biggest lesson and change.
Ishwar, you've been known as a dean who is not adverse to change. So in your view, to what extent has what the provost indicated proven true? How have things evolved so that maybe the university can accommodate innovation, internal innovation in its processes more readily?
So a year ago, we were thinking about how to create more agile graduates. And when we were thinking about creating more agile graduates, that required us to be agile as well. University structures are not known to foster agility. And I think that that was the big bottleneck a year ago. What the pandemic asked us to do was to be agile, and it asked us to pivot very rapidly, which meant that we had to accelerate decision-making within the university, within the faculty, within consortia of faculties, within consortia of universities as well. And so what I would say is that in the quest to make our graduates more agile, we have also learned the virtue of agility. So we've been much more agile in transforming education, whereas virtual education, virtual teaching and learning perhaps a year ago was a decade-long path. It's now here. So what we've done is we've established two things. One is we've established the infrastructure we require for a virtual education, and we're gradually adding to it. The next is that we've lowered the emotional and pedagogical barriers to virtual teaching and learning. And so I think those are two tremendous breakthroughs that have taken us forward. We now know the limitations of virtual teaching and learning, but we also know the power of virtual teaching and learning. And so I would say that a year ago, we were focused on agility, but agility in terms of graduate outcomes, attributes for our graduates. But today, we are focused on a holistic agility, that we ourselves become agile while moving the needle forward in developing more agile graduates.
Susan, you joined McMaster just this past July, literally between waves of the pandemic, as our provost and vice president academic. What's the transition been like for you to join a university that's in turmoil, and what have been your impressions of McMaster in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, thanks, John. And first and foremost, I think that what really attracted me to McMaster was the strength in research and overall the reputation of the school. I had been very fortunate for many years to have exposure to the university through collaborations. And so that was really attractive to me. And I would say I've been so impressed. I mean, McMaster is the #1 research intensive university in the country, and we rank in the top 70 internationally. So all of those were quite attractive, and I can say that culture, the culture of McMaster, has really been a wonderful thing to see. And it really is what you see, what you get. I mean, from the outside, you hear about the rankings, and then you actually get into the culture and you really see what it's all about. Many challenges to joining a brand new institution, and certainly at the level of provost during a pandemic. I would say that many of my colleagues thought I was crazy to take this on at this moment in time. However, the one thing that I really knew and was attracted to was the sense of community. I think that the values at McMaster and the professionalism of the faculty and staff are really outstanding. But there's no question joining a brand new organization at this time has been challenging, because I haven't met most of my direct reports. I haven't met the university community. And so I guess this idea of agility and resilience have really, for me, been personally something that has really forced me to reach out to people, to build a community virtually. And so that has been definitely a great learning experience. And I think for me personally, it also helps me understand what our faculty and staff are going through and what our students are going through. You know, how do you come into a brand new environment, a very different type of environment, and have to learn and not have those face-to-face experiences? So I think it's also made me more empathetic to the virtual environment in a different way, that because I don't have those established relationships, it's coming in and really building something. So I think that has really given me a different perspective on the virtual learning from different ways, in a professional environment, but also in how we actually teach our students. I guess I would also say that I've just been so impressed with the collaboration. I have never been at an institution where people collaborate in the way that they do at McMaster, a real genuine interest in wanting to work together. And I think that has been huge, because in this environment, in this virtual environment, if you aren't collaborating, you can't be successful. This is a team sport, and you cannot do it all alone. In all of the activities that we participate in as an institution, we have to work together as a team. And so I think that has been really refreshing and important, and also unique.
Susan, I'm not exactly sure of the time frame, but it would have been perhaps before you joined McMaster or shortly after that McMaster made the decision that the fall term, this term that we're in this year, was going to be online, and somewhat later that the January term was going to be online as well. Can you talk about what resources the university tried to put into place during the summer months to make this possible?
Sure. So the announcement was made, I believe, in March or April, that McMaster was going to be virtual for the fall 2020 term. So that was prior to my joining. So when I joined, it was quite an interesting and a challenging time, because that's when the rubber was hitting the road. That's when people were really starting to look at, what resources do we need? How are we going to deliver curriculum? And really focusing on, how are we going to deliver this curriculum in a quality manner? And so one of my first decisions was to invest a substantial amount of money into the virtual learning. So providing additional resources that would be available to faculty. In all, it was about an additional $15 million that we put in to the virtual learning, different areas of virtual learning, whether that was technology, software, additional training, hosting virtual panels where faculty members could share ideas, about how they were going to deliver curriculum. And then, of course, as we got into the fall, what were the best lessons learned? How could we share what we were doing? So a substantial investment, that was part of my first weeks in the institution. Shortly thereafter, I had set up a task force, which Dean Puri co-chaired, on the virtual learning task force, so that we could understand going into the fall how our students were experiencing things, how our faculty were experiencing things. For me personally, it really is about asking how people are doing, listening to how they're doing, and acting. So we asked early on, how students were finding things, how faculty were finding things, and we got some initial results that came back very quickly. We knew that there were some concerns related to mental health. We knew that there were concerns related to different instructors using different platforms. We knew that students were challenged, depending on where they were, to have internet access that was stable. And we knew that some of our students were in very different time zones. So how are we going to accommodate them? So immediately we started to get some information back. We were listening to that. And of course, I was working closely with the deans and others on our admin team to see how we could really respond to those concerns. And so I think that was really important, that we were embarking on this. We knew that we could do it, but it was really a matter of how we could, be dynamic and be able to make decisions and changes as we were going along for continuous improvement. And I mean, I think as engineers, this is really part of our culture. We're always trying to continually improve and continually advance, and I think push the boundaries. And I think that was really our fall 2020. And then really, as we got towards the end of the term and as the task force was wrapping up, they had a number of recommendations: short, medium, long term. What should we be doing now? What can we do in the shorter term? And really thinking already about fall 2021. So to me, I think it's really about planning. It's about acting on the advice of all of our stakeholders, and really recognizing that we're probably not going to do things perfectly the first time, but we're going to listen, we're going to learn, and we're going to continue to improve.
Ishwar, I find it interesting that in the midst of all of this transformation and turmoil, McMaster Engineering was in the early stages, very early stages, of what some have called one of the boldest reforms of engineering education to take place at a major university, which we refer to internally as the pivot. And a big step in that was due to take place in 2020, which was the transformation of first-year education. Can you describe your thoughts in terms of whether to go forward with this bold transformation of education that really relied upon, at its core, hands-on experiential education? And how would we ever be able to make that happen in the virtual world?
There was quite a discussion, John. Let me back up a little bit. I think at the outset, I have to say that I am fortunate to be surrounded by many prescient colleagues. And really, in our faculty, we have a flat leadership structure. So while I'm certainly the facilitator, the leadership is so broad that it is also in many ways prescient about future developments. Take the pandemic or the pivot to virtual teaching and learning, for instance. The magnitude or the severity of the pandemic in Canada became apparent in mid-March. But in the faculty, because of prescient colleagues, we had already scheduled workshops for virtual work and virtual teaching and learning starting in February. So we had about a month's head start. And similarly, that prescient leadership, which is very flat, which is very broad, and it permeates so many aspects of the Faculty of Engineering at McMaster, decided 2 years ago to virtualize elements of the pivot. When we started thinking about this very bold transformation of integrated engineering learning, where engineers don't learn specific subjects differently, but we decided to do them according to a spiral curriculum where you spiral different subjects and students learn through this spiraling where they relate one subject to another. We actually started that conversation about 2.5 years ago. And we started developing this transformative curriculum. It's never been done before. It's been done in small ways at some institutions. But we have about 1,100 students now who are participating in this integrated curriculum. At the heart of the integrated curriculum in the first year is a 13-credit course. So all of engineering subjects are taught in one course that begins in September and ends in April. And the concern then was that, well, if a student falls ill or if they have a life event and they miss one portion of the course, would they then have to repeat the entire course? Can't we give them access? The course essentially is 5 integrated projects, an introductory project, and then another 4 projects that become more and more open-ended. And, one of our prescient colleagues said, what we should do is virtualize this to give access to students who might be unable to take a portion of the course. So we'd already thought about virtualization. So come February and come March, we've already been training to virtualize our work and virtualize our teaching and learning. We'd already thought about ways of virtualizing the integrated 13-credit course. All this came together, and I take you back to the word I used earlier is agility. Agility comes not just from DNA, from intrinsic work or the intrinsic efforts that people make. Agility actually comes from how leadership is structured. And when leadership is structured, and that's the DNA of the Faculty of Engineering, the leadership is structured so that it is broad, people have hope, they have agency, and they can control over their lives, and they can make decisions, and those decisions can be rapidly discussed. I think that was the basis of deciding very early on in March and April that we have to virtualize experiential learning. Virtualizing experiential learning is very difficult. So students in the 13-credit course, which we call 1P13, work on these 5 projects in teams of 4 or 5. The teams rotate through the projects randomly. And these teams have to connect with each other. They have to actually solve problems. They have to work with robots. They have to work with autonomous vehicles. So we had to virtualize the robots. We had to virtualize the autonomous vehicles. Those that go into energy applications such as a wind turbine. We had to virtualize a wind turbine application. And finally, the students actually do a project where they build a recycling plant with their prior knowledge. So all of this had to be virtualized in a way that students would relate to. We were very fortunate to work with an educational technology company called Quanser, and Quanser's choice was very deliberate. At the very outset, there were many companies that were interested in working with us. But we thought that we would have a made in Canada solution. And we insisted that our partner, all things being equal, our partner should be Canadian. And that partnership with Quanzur is now world renowned. It's appeared in magazines. It's been disseminated through the Engineering Deans Global Fora, and it's caught the attention of the province and the federal government. So, so I think that we were prescient in anticipating virtualization. We were fortunate to have a partner. We had a very broad and flat leadership team. All that came together and gave us confidence that we could pull it off. About a month and a half ago, I went on a world tour, which was a Zoom world tour, to meet students around the world. And I recall this student in Kenya, and he said he really wanted to come to McMaster because he wanted to feel McMaster. He wanted to get to know his students. He wanted to get to know the campus, participate in activities. And he was disappointed he couldn't do that because of travel restrictions. And he said that he was frustrated in some of his courses, but the one thing that gave him hope and joy was 1P13. It was that integrated 13 credit course. I mean, isn't that marvelous? Isn't that marvelous to hear from a student? And I think, you know, that those are the kinds of things that we've done which move the needle. It was a difficult decision, but not so difficult because of the talent we had, the distributed, very flat leadership team we had, the suppression of egos, the great collaboration, and just joy in being student-centered. I mean, that's one thing the Faculty of Engineering is, it's student-centered. So I would say, you know, that as we look upon the last year with anxiety, we also look upon it with joy, because that joy comes from accomplishments and assisting young people to meet their aspirations and to have their dreams come true.
Susan, I could see you smiling when you heard your Dean of Engineering talk about some of the innovations that have the positive outcomes that have come from being forced off campus and onto a virtual environment. I'm sure that across the university, there are other examples where blended learning is going to become more prevalent as we go forward. What are the challenges that comes to a brick and mortar based universities, even one with a beautiful campus like McMaster, as blended learning becomes more prevalent?
Right, and I think that right now it is a great opportunity for us to rethink how we use space on campus. I think that combining virtual activities with in-class activities are really an optimal solution. And so it's really exciting for me to hear about how our curriculum has been transformed into really truly novel ways of not only delivering, but I think for learning. I think that by using the positive aspects of virtual learning, with combining that with in-person experiences, are really powerful. And I think certainly what I'm seeing across campus in collaborations and discussions with deans and associate deans, there's a real interest to take the best of both worlds, to really use virtual learning methods for better, efficient ways of delivering some kinds of curriculum, and then really using that in-class time, the labs, the in-person activities to really do other things and to really rethink how we actually teach and how we learn and how we do research, quite frankly. All of these ways of combining these tools are really going to change things. I think that with respect to our bricks and mortar, and you're absolutely right, John, campus is beautiful, and we really need to think about how we make the most of our campus. And I think that we will always have a campus. There will always be a need and desire to be on campus. I think that when we think about a lot of our larger classrooms and larger lectures, I think that those may not be the same as we move into the future, that we might want to use, the opportunity to do virtual in different ways. However, I wouldn't want to say out front that we're not going to ever go back to having big lectures, because we all know that we have some amazing instructors. And, even though you have a big lecture, some of those amazing instructors can really deliver curriculum well, even though you're in a big classroom. So I think it's going to be some specialized type of training we'll do. I think it's going to be using our resources to the best of our ability. I think, it's using our campus to the best of our ability, and really rethinking again how we allocate space and making sure we use it effectively. Um, so I think it's an exciting time. I think that it's going to enable us to rethink everything that we do. I think it's about operational excellence as well. So, this pertains to everything that we do on campus. Can we do it better? Can we do it more efficient? I think that, some of our feelings before, where we really felt handcuffed, that we had to do things in a certain way, we don't need to do that anymore. And so I think the onus is on us to really be creative and what works best. If we're truly student centered, what works best for the students? And we want to support our faculty. What works best for faculty? What kinds of resources do we have in play? What kinds of infrastructure do we need? I mean, I think this is also a really important question. What kinds of tools do we need to make available, and what kinds of digital platforms do we need to make available, so that we can differentiate ourselves and that we can deliver high quality student experience, high quality teaching, and high quality research. I think that when we think about student experience specifically, there's no question the importance of being on campus and having those interactions with other students in person and faculty. So I think it's an exciting time. I think it's a time where we really need to rethink. I think what's happened in the Faculty of Engineering, these initiatives have worked well. And so how do we use some of the lessons learned that have been clearly been articulated by the Dean of Engineering and really apply them to other areas? Are they going to work well everywhere? Probably not, but where can they work? And how can we really provide the resources and support, most importantly, so that they can be successful? So, the next 5 years, I see a real opportunity to rethink how we deliver education at McMaster. And, we're going to hold on to those core, well, obviously we have core values, and we're going to ensure that we do our best to deliver, but we're also going to use all these innovative tools. And I think the other thing is, our students are smart. Our students are probably more flexible than a lot of our faculty members. So I think, how do we listen to our students? Again, let's ask them, let's listen, and let's act. And I think as instructors and faculty members, one of the great things about working at McMaster is the quality and the interest of our faculty. And so how do we learn how to do new things, and how do we learn to deliver the curriculum and research in different and new ways? So again, I think we're always going to use our campus. We're excited and happy to be thinking about trying to get back to campus. and how do we use the tools that we have available to us.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we discuss what the future of engineering education holds, and I press our provost with the question that's on all of our minds. Will we return to campus in the fall, and how will we do that?